Is that a Utes hat, Kyle? Is that the Utes?
All right, here we go.
My bad.
And welcome to the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com. Kevin Rogers with you. And you see we have a bit of a new layout, so we're looking forward to this, changing things up. And we're going to talk a lot of college football today with our guest, Brian Edwards. As you see him there, Vegas B. Edwards, his Twitter handle. And we welcome Kyle Hunter as well at Kyle Hunter Picks. So very excited for both of them to join us here today. And I guess I'll start with Brian. Are you over the devastating news of Tim Tebow getting cut by the Jags?
Just another of many dumbass moves by Urban Meyer and what will be a dismal and forgettable tenure as the NFL head coach for the Jags.
That's it. You're just going to leave it at that. Good. I'm glad.
No, I'll leave 19-9 career TD-INT ratio, 13 rushing touchdowns, 5.0 yards per carry.
Okay, good to hear that. Okay, well, hopefully the divorce doesn't affect them long term. All right, guys, we want to talk a lot of college football today, and let's start with the SEC. And again, the question on everybody's mind is obviously, can Nick Saban reload? And it seems like he does it all the time. Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Patrick Surtain II, among the guys that are gone now. And Bryce Young, he's in there as the quarterback of the Crimson Tide. Brian, I'll start with you. Any thoughts on them getting dethroned, or is it just Alabama and everybody else in the SEC?
I think that Alabama's ahead of everybody in the SEC, but they've got 3 tough road games at A&M, at Florida, which will be a first career road start for Bryce Young. It's going to be an afternoon game in the Swamp in mid-September. Going to be super duper hot. That's not going to be an easy one. College Station won't be easy. And, we'll see how Auburn's playing in December. They're fortunate they get LSU at home. Or fortunate is not a good word. I mean, they're better than LSU. But I do think LSU's going to have a nice bounce back year. But, yeah, to me, Alabama's at the top. I've got them 1 in my power rankings. Now, I think that Clemson and Oklahoma are very close to them, however, and I don't think there's a whole lot of separation between Bama and Clemson and Oklahoma. But, yeah, those are my first thoughts on it.
Kyle?
Yeah, it's hard to pick against anybody like Alabama. They just reload. Their 2 deep is so good. This is an Alabama team to me that, they've proven it time and time again to where they lose a lot and they come back the next year. They have some question marks and then they're that good yet again. So I'm not going to pick against Alabama. I will say the wide receivers is where there's going to be a pretty significant drop-off, you'd think, right? You lose Waddle and Smith, even with the guys that are talented stepping in right there. I would think there would be a bit of a drop-off. So in the passing game, I wonder if they'll be quite as good. I think their defense is probably better than they were a year ago. Honestly, Alabama's defense was not tremendous last year, and they were still that dominant. So it's hard to pick against Alabama. They're certainly the favorites.
Elsewhere in the SEC, you kind of say, all right, who's going to be the surprise team? And we saw how Arkansas improved a little bit last year. You wonder if Missouri is going to make that move. Now, Josh Heupel's at Tennessee. What's going to happen there? And I'll stick with Kyle on this one. What are your thoughts on the surprise team in the SEC? We know what Alabama can do. We know what Georgia can do. We know what Florida can do. But who else kind of in the middle there is going to take that next step up?
So can we count Texas A&M as a surprise team? Because that would be my
sure. Sure, and they have a new quarterback too with Kellen Mond gone.
Sure, yeah, and I think not that I thought Kellen Mond was really a bad quarterback, but I think he might have been overrated by some people. And Texas A&M's running game is going to be very good. It's going to be really hard to stop them in the run game. Love their defensive coordinator. I think that defense will be nasty. I think Texas A&M has upside. Fisher's clearly a good coach. I think Texas A&M is one of those teams that if they win double-digit games and they're 10 or 11 win team this year, I think it would be no surprise. In fact, it wouldn't stun me if they're in the national conversation for a title this year. Having said that, certainly they have a new quarterback coming in, so there are question marks. But I feel like Texas A&M is a team with a lot of upside. One other that I would say just upside team is Ole Miss. Kiffin's done a good job there so far, has a perfect quarterback for his system, very accurate quarterback. I think they have upside as well.
And Brian, just staying on top of it, we see all the new coaches in this league with Heupel, with Beamer at South Carolina, Vandy. I mean, they're starting from scratch. It feels like every single year. But who in there also do you like as a surprise?
I'll go Mississippi State. Leach comes in. They had been, a run-based team previously under Moorhead, and you had Nick Fitzgerald, and now he's going to his air raid attack. And, by early mid-October last year, he had 18 guys that already opted out. But despite that, they were playing good down the stretch. They only lost by 7 at Georgia. That game was tied with less than 10 minutes left as a 25-point dog. They only lost by 7 and covered at Ole Miss. They played Auburn fairly tough as well. And then they thumped Missouri, and they beat Tulsa in the bowl game. They've got one of the most underrated defensive coordinators in the country in Zach Arnett, and their defense was solid last year. They add 7 transfers. They had the number 26 class in the nation recruiting-wise, but there are some JUCO guys in there that can come in and, bolster their lines on both sides of the ball. They got a Jameer Calvin, who was a really good receiver for Leach at Washington State. So I think Mississippi State, I'm not like – I think they'll go over their win total of 6. I think they could maybe win 8 if they can beat NC State at home and win at Memphis. Now, both of those are definitely going to be tough games. But, as Leach gets his guys in there, I think they'll be improved. And he played a lot of freshmen last year. He got a lot of valuable playing time. I'll point out, 2 of them, Will Rogers, the quarterback, and Jaden Wally, really good receiver. He is going to be – or he already is a big-time player. And they added Jack Abraham in the transfer portal as well. So nice veteran quarterback with 27 career starts and more than 7,000 career passing yards to his credit. So you got a veteran backup as well if Rogers gets injured or falters.
In the ACC, Trevor Lawrence now gone off to Jacksonville, and Clemson, obviously the odds-on favorite in this whole thing. But which team or teams, I mean, it's hard to say who's going to knock off Clemson, but who has got any kind of shot there? I know, Brian, you love Sam Howell at North Carolina. I know that's your guy. But, Brian, starting with you with the ACC, we know Clemson's going to be the runaway train, but who else in there can give them maybe a run for their money?
Boston College. They were up by 18 at Clemson in the second quarter last year, had a 28-13 halftime lead. I think Boston College is poised for a big year. Hafley is a defensive guy and didn't have spring practice and, didn't really get – I think they were pretty vanilla defensively last year, didn't really have the time and practices to, get his full scheme in. I love Phil Dracovic, their QB, and Zay Flowers, one of the best receivers in the country. And their receiving group is outstanding, and they've got one of the best O-lines in the country. Lindy's Magazine ranked them 2nd in the country, their O-line, and Phil Steele's national unit rankings have them 9th in the country on the O-line. They've got some transfers coming in, 6 of them. They've got Kobe White coming back from an injury. He's got more than 1,400 receiving yards, 27 career starts, missed last year with an ACL. And I love their win total over 7. The non-con is a joke. Colgate at home, at UMass, at Temple. Missouri at home in a toss-up game. The only game that looks unwinnable is at Clemson. But like I said, they had a double-digit lead, in that game at Clemson last year. And their toughest ACC games are at home: NC State, Vatech, FSU, and Wake. So I expect a nice year, too, under Jeff Hafley. And I'll also mention their FCS transfer tight end, Trey Berry. Watch out for him. He's a big target, 6'7" guy, 245, and he can move. I'm real bullish on BC this year. I'm not saying they're going to win at Clemson, but I love their win total over 7.
Kyle?
Yeah, I was going to say Boston College myself too, so I agree with him on that one. I think Boston College is a well-coached team. I was impressed with their improvements last year. I mean, that was right at the beginning of a 10-year, and Boston College had to throw the ball all the time last year, and it still worked. Jurkovich is a good quarterback, certainly, good wide receivers. The defense is going to improve. When you have that good of a defensive coach in Hafley, they're going to improve on defense. One I will throw out in addition, I think NC State could be a pretty good team this year. Devin Leary played really well before having that major injury. As long as he stays healthy, I think NC State's a team that has really high upside. Doran's likely an underrated coach, in my opinion. NC State's a pretty solid defense, really good running attack. 2 running backs there, Bam Knight, the best of them, but 2 really good running backs for NC State. Not saying I think NC State can challenge Clemson in any way. And actually, NC State has a really tough schedule. So that's going to be a detriment to them, certainly. But I think they could be a good ATS team. And I do kind of like over 6.5 for their win total as well.
Yeah, NC State, they start the season with USF at home, and then they go to Mississippi State. So that should be interesting. And then they get Clemson in late September coming up in Raleigh. I want to go back to Brian for Florida State. And I know that you wrote something or had an interview with warchant.com regarding the Seminoles. And it's Mike Norvell's second season as head coach. Now he's got a quarterback, and we'll see how healthy Mackenzie Milton is after he had that devastating leg injury a few years ago with USF. But it seems like, Brian, you don't really have that pulse as far as like what they're going to do. Explain that.
Well, just Mackenzie Milton was one of the top quarterbacks in the country. He had that, catastrophic injury. He hasn't played in 2 years, and I haven't seen him play. So I don't want to have any set in stone opinions on the Noles going into the year when I haven't seen Milton play, when they've got 10 transfers. Last year was a nightmare, but it's not on Norvell. He didn't have the spring to get his system and verbiage and all that installed, and he walked into an unmitigated disaster. So now that they've had a whole offseason, and I liked the hire of Norvell, and you've got a guy who can definitely play quarterback very well if he's mostly recovered from that injury. So I just need to see how the transfers gel. But I've got them 4-6 with 2 swing games, being NC State and Miami at home, which is probably better for FSU getting them later in the year. So, if they can get to a bowl game, I think that would be a decent bounce back season considering all the circumstances.
Looking at the Big Ten now, and obviously, again, another big favorite, Ohio State, after they went to the national championship last year. And Justin Fields gone. He's with the Bears, and Ohio State starting from scratch at quarterback, even though they're still very talented. And Kyle, again, I feel like I'm asking the same question as far as Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. Who can knock them off? Who do you like in the Big Ten as far as a team that can compete with the Buckeyes? Is it Penn State? Is it Wisconsin? Is Harbaugh enough of Michigan? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an Ohio State fan, but certainly I can be a better first. I will say Ohio State will be down at quarterback without Justin Fields, but they have some really good talent there. CJ Stroud likely to be the starter, tremendous backups there. You think somebody will probably end up transferring. They bring in some great running backs, Travion Henderson. I think we'll see the field pretty quick. So I think the question for Ohio State is, can their defense be better? Because last year's defense for Ohio State was unacceptable. We saw how that went in the title game against Alabama, certainly. So we'll see if they improve there. As far as teams that can knock them off, I think Wisconsin has the best chance with an upside. Does Graham Mertz take that next step? He looked really good in that first game last year, and then Mertz kind of tailed off, didn't play that well the rest of the season, at least compared to expectations. I do think Mertz will be better this year. Jalen Berger, really good for Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's a team that still has very high upside. I know some people are high on Iowa. I'm a little bit concerned about Iowa being able to challenge a team like Ohio State because Spencer Petras, to me, is not good enough at quarterback. I don't think he's strong enough quarterback to play against the top teams in this league. So I think Graham Mertz has a higher upside. Penn State's a tough team for me because Clifford, again, not a guy that I love at quarterback. I know he can scramble and make plays, but he's very inconsistent. I want somebody who's more consistent than him. Penn State, tremendous running game. So I think they'll be able to run on most teams in this league. Certainly, they'll have a much better season than they had last year. But I would say Wisconsin has the highest upside of those other teams.
And you look at Ohio State, too, and Ohio State starts the season at Minnesota. Then they get Oregon coming to the Horseshoe. So it really is going to be an interesting first 2 games for Ohio State. And Brian, with the Big Ten and, again, Ohio State, the team to beat. But past that, I'm going to throw one out at you. What do you think about Michigan? What are your thoughts with Harbaugh? Because it feels like every single year with Harbaugh, the expectations are high, and yet he seems to fall flat.
I mean, Bowman was average at Texas Tech. I mean, 33-17 career TDI and T ratio. He started 16 games for the Red Raiders. I don't know if it's going to be him or McCarthy or McNamara, but I just don't think they're going to be elite at quarterback. And they have been, all throughout Harbaugh's tenure, they've been elite defensively. I mean, their worst scoring defense before last year was 20.7 points per game during his tenure. What makes 22.4 in his first year. But since then, 20.7 in 2019. But then last year they give up 34.5 points per game. So they're not even, they're not good on the defensive side of the ball right now either. They bring back 7 starters on that side. But yeah, I mean, I think Michigan can maybe win. I've got them 6-3 with 3 swing games. The swing games being Washington at home, Indiana at home, and at Maryland, which they're probably going to be. They'll be favored, but Baby Tua had a few good games last year, so I mean they can maybe win 8 or 9. We'll see, but I mean they're not in Ohio State's neighborhood by any means. But like Kyle pointed out, I mean Ohio State's got some issues defensively. That was their worst scoring defense in more than a decade last year, and they lost 6 starters off of that unit. So I still think Ohio State's definitely the team to beat in the Big Ten there.
We go to the Big 12 guys, and Oklahoma and Texas, where the clock is ticking on them in this conference. And in a few years, they'll be in the SEC and the Big 12. Who knows how long that's going to last after that. But Spencer Rattler, again, he's going to be somebody that's going to be talked about to win the Heisman this year. And it feels like in years past that the favorite doesn't necessarily always win the Heisman. And we saw Devontae Smith won it last year, and he definitely was not the favorite to begin the season. But I want to shift over to Texas and Steve Sarkisian, now the head coach, taking over for Tom Herman. That Ellinger gone now to the NFL. And Kyle, I'll start with you with Texas, that the impact that Sarkisian can make now kind of in his second shot as actually his third shot as head coach, go from Washington to USC. He had the issues there, and now down to Texas.
Yeah, Texas is a team that I'm a wait and see approach on them. I think Texas certainly still has a high upside. And I will say, I think some people get a little too low on Texas because of their last few seasons. They've been hyped so many times now, right? And people have been wrong that it would be easy to just jump ship and be done with Texas. But let's give Sarkisian a chance that maybe he'll do a better job with them than Tom Herman was doing. We know Herman was great in the underdog role, but they lost a lot of games they shouldn't have lost. I guess we assume that Thompson will be the quarterback here. I know they have a quarterback controversy here. I think Texas at running back is obviously stacked. I think they'll have a really good running game. The question is on defense, how good will they be? To me, Texas is a team that has a high upside but low floor, and that's one of those teams that in their first 2 or 3 games of the season, I want to wait and see and not bet anything on this. I feel like there's too much volatility there.
Yeah, and Texas begins the season with Louisiana at home, a pretty good team out of the Sun Belt. And they go to Arkansas, and they get Rice at home. So we'll see how that goes with Texas. And, Brian, I know that you're a fan of Matt Campbell at Iowa State. I know that you like him and what the Cyclones were able to do last year. They played Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl and really busted out. But do you think Iowa State can have that repeat performance this year, considering they have Brock Purdy back at quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, they've got pretty much their, a whole team back for the most part. I mean, they've got 7 guys that were all conference on just offense alone coming back. 5 guys that were first team all Big 12, 2 guys that were second team. And that's just on the offensive side of the ball. Phil Steele's national unit rankings have them number 10 at the quarterback position, number 3 running backs, number 8 wide receivers, number 4 O-line, number 2 linebackers. He's not as high on their D-line and DBs, but Athlon ranked their secondary number 9 in America. Now the schedule, they've had horrible. They've only won 1 out of the last 15 games at K-State. So that one's always a tough one for them. Iowa at home is, I mean, I agree with Kyle. I don't like Petrus as the quarterback, but Iowa is a solid team that, potentially could beat them in that spot. Never fun to go to Morgantown, and they go at Oklahoma. Now, if they're able to go 11-1 with their only loss at Oklahoma, they'll get a rematch 2 weeks later. So at Oklahoma game can kind of just be a assuming they win the others, but that's not a safe assumption at all. But they could lose that one and still get a chance for redemption. I've got Iowa State number 4 in my power rankings going into the year. I think they're legit and love Matt Campbell.
We'll get to some win totals in just a moment. My last conference I want to look at with you guys, just because there were teams that played 4 games last year, 3 games, the Pac-12, and how that thing turned out with some of these teams. And, when you look at how the Pac-12 championship ended, or Washington was supposed to play, and if they couldn't play because they had COVID issues, how much of an impact do you think the shortened seasons with the Pac-12? I know the Big Ten had issues too, but the Pac-12, they started late, and some of these teams didn't play a whole season or didn't play half a normal season. Kyle, what kind of impact do you think it'll make on some of the top teams, if any?
Well, it gives us less to go on. First of all, as handicappers, I think there's a little bit more unknown in a conference like this. But I think a team like Washington has to come in pretty fired up about a season like this because, here they just okay, COVID and your season's just over, instead of having a chance in that championship game. I would think a team like that would be extremely fired up. Oregon, a team that clearly has upside. I'm a bit concerned that Oregon seems to lose a game or two every year that they really have no business losing. Cristobal is a good coach as far as recruiting. Not sure he's the best X's and O's coach out there, but this is a conference to me that is pretty wide open. There's a lot of good teams in the Pac-12. I think we've all kind of ragged on the Pac-12 in the past, but you take teams like USC, which I think you could question how good of a coach they have as well with Helton, USC, Utah, Oregon, Washington, even Arizona State looking very good this year. I think the Pac-12, is going to be a really interesting conference this season. And like I said, we have less to go off of here. I think it helps the teams that actually got to play a few more games in this conference than some of the others. So I would be careful about betting on those teams that only got to play 3 games last year. I think that's a detriment, certainly.
Yeah, 2 teams that played 7 games in the regular season were UCLA and Oregon State. The only ones that got to 7. Washington got to 4. Colorado got to 4. It's just tough. It's very tough for everyone that was involved out there. And who was it? Arizona went 0-5, and they had that 70-7 loss or whatever it was to Arizona State. That really ugly loss. But Brian, anything else you want to add there with the Pac-12?
Well, I think Oregon, like Kyle noted with Cristobal's recruiting, I think Oregon has the best roster, but their quarterback situation, I don't know. Anthony Brown's 28 career starts, 40-20 career TDI-INT ratio, but he's not very accurate, 55% completion percentage. I mean, I like Oregon's roster. I don't know about their quarterback. And Utah, I really like their O-line and D-lines, which are 2 of the best in America. Just a great defense. Well, their numbers defensively were not that great last year, but Phil Steele's national unit rankings have their D-line 11th. Their linebackers and secondary are both 13th, and he's got their O-line ranked 5th. I like Charlie Brewer, the transfer from Baylor, 4-year starter, 39 career starts, 9,700 career passing yards, 65-28 TDI-INT ratio. They brought in 8 transfers, 6 are former 4-star recruits, and now the schedule is kind of tricky. I've got them with 6 wins and 6 swing games, but I think Utah could be really good, and I would be super high on Arizona State, but they've had all this off-field stuff, and they just fired 2 more assistants last week. Now, it hasn't really affected their personnel too much, except for their all first-team All Pac-12 punter transferred. But it's a punter. I'm sure they can find somebody to fill in there. But if not for all that stuff, I would be hyping Jaden Daniels in this ASU squad. But that's another team we only got to see 4 times last year.
Let's look at some win totals for the season and some of your best bets. And Kyle, we'll start with you. And I guess I'll just begin with your hat that you're wearing. the Utah Utes, and you do like them to go over this season.
Yeah, I was going to say, so Utah, a team that I decided to wear the Utah hat here today because I thought it was pretty fitting. But Kyle Whittingham is a bet on coach for me. This is a team that is going to be ready every single week. They're really good in the trenches. I think Phil Steele might even be underrating their defensive line at number 11. Last year, they were really inexperienced on the defensive line. I would think this is the top 5 or 6 defensive line this year. They'll be very good at getting pressure on the quarterback. And Kyle Whittingham said before the season, this is the best offensive line he's ever had. I think that's pretty impressive. Whittingham's not one of those guys that just comes out and throws out those comments every year either. So I don't think that that's just something for him to say every season. I think that it says quite a bit. Charlie Brewer is a big, big upgrade from Jake Bentley. As long as Brewer stays healthy, I think their upside is far higher than it has been in the past. They're strong linebackers, pretty good secondary. You know, they avoid Washington this year on the schedule. They host both Oregon and Arizona State. And I think we all know Salt Lake City is a really tough place to play at altitude, really loud crowd. USC is a tough road game, but the other 3 road games, only 4 Pac-12 road games for them this year, are at Stanford, at Oregon State, and at lowly Arizona. I think Arizona is going to get beaten around very many times this year. A team this strong in the trenches, to me, is always capable of really big things. And I think when you add in a guy like Charlie Brewer and you have as good a coach as Kyle Whittingham, I think this is going to be a good team ATS. And I think they will get to 9 or 10 wins at least here this year. So I like Utah. I think they have a real chance to win that Pac-12 South, which is very competitive, even a chance to win the Pac-12 in general. So I like Utah's season win total over quite a bit this season.
And Kyle, let's go to your next total, Old Dominion, and your thoughts on them.
Yeah, you know, if people follow my handicapping style, I had to go with some of these underrated, under the radar type teams because I really like these smaller conferences. That's where I find the most value. Old Dominion. So I look at their schedule and you realize that Old Dominion didn't play last season. So we're talking about these teams that only got to play 3 or 4 games last year. Old Dominion didn't play at all. And 2 years ago, they were terrible. I don't know why we would expect them to just all at once be much better. I know they've picked up quite a few transfers. These guys were not all that highly touted to begin with, but they're winnable games this season. So Hampton, you assume they're going to beat Hampton. At UTEP, I think UTEP's a little bit better than some people think they might be. La Tech, Charlotte. I mean, I don't know where their games are going to be that they win here. This team had serious problems before last year, and then they didn't get to play at all last year. I think that hurts quite a bit. The defensive line is one of the worst in the entire country. They're going to give up tons of yards on the ground, not going to get any pressure on the quarterback. The secondary is also really bad. So you have a weak defensive line and a bad secondary. In today's college football, it's a really bad recipe to try to win games. I don't think this team's going to be favored more than a couple times this year. And I don't see them. I think the ceiling here is 4. So taking under 4.5 at FanDuel, I like this play as well.
And finally, in the American, we really didn't hit on them. SMU, you like the over on them.
Yeah, you know, Sonny Dykes' offense is pretty easy to step into and have success right away. I think Sonny Dykes is probably a bit underrated as a coach. And this is a top 20 offensive line in the country. So Tanner Mordecai steps in at quarterback. And obviously the question mark is how much is the drop off at quarterback because they've had such good quarterback play the past few seasons. But he has a great group around him. Grant Calcaterra is a great pickup at tight end. I think he should do well in this offense. Robertson returning from injury. This is a top 15 or 20 wide receiver class in the country. The defense is far from great, but they've been getting better every year. They have a good pass rush. They're going to give up some big plays, certainly. But this is a team that should score a lot of points here against the schedule they have. And I regret that I didn't say the underrated rushing group, which averaged 4.68 yards per carry. I feel like SMU is going to score a lot of points this season. I think Mordecai, as long as he's just decent, 6 is a low total for a team like SMU. I see several easy wins on the schedule, good pieces around Mordecai. So he's set for success here, and I think SMU will have a good season.
And those are Kyle Hunter's best bets for win totals. Brian, you like one win total. You mentioned them earlier, and who would that be?
That's Boston College, over 7. And I think I covered that pretty good. Can I just step over to a week 1 play I like?
Absolutely, you can.
Let's go with Louisiana. I got it at +10. If your number's 9.5, probably want to buy that half point at the key number of 10. Although I am going to call for the Raging Cajuns to pull a week 1 upset, just like they did last year. They went into Ames and won 31-14 over a very good Iowa State team. They bring back 20 of 24 starters. They've got a veteran quarterback in Levi Lewis, who has a 54-14 career TDI and T ratio. They basically bring their entire team back. They only lost 12 Letterman. They did lose their 2 stud running backs, but I think their 3rd string running back from last year is going to be really good. I'm talking about Chris Smith, who was a 2nd team All-American as a kick returner last year, and he was 4th in the Sun Belt Conference in all-purpose yards. He ran for 5.6 yards per carry. Also had 16 catches, 170 yards, 1 touchdown. They've added some nice transfers, including a former A&M running back to beef up the depth at the running back position. They've got one of the top 10 to 15 O-lines in the country. They've got one of the best secondaries in America. They're terrific on special teams. They've got both of their specialist kickers back. And then in the return game, you've got Smith. And then they've got an excellent punt returner as well, and Eric Garor. Texas, I think, has a suspect defense, a new coach, a new quarterback, and I think they're ripe to be upset in week 1 by the Raging Cajuns, who I think I've got them with 9 wins and 3 swing games, being at Texas, at Arkansas State, and at Liberty. But Billy Napier 7-1-1 against the spread his last 9 as a road underdog. And I'm big on the Raging Cajuns in week 1.
Kyle, any thoughts on any week 0, week 1 games that stick out to you right now, or no?
I haven't looked at too many of the games yet. I've been doing more with the futures and the win totals, but I will say, just to tag on to what Brian said, I think that's a good play. I like Louisiana. They're one of the teams that I considered taking over their season win totals. So I think they do have a chance of winning that game outright. If you take Louisiana plus the 9.5 or 10, you probably want to put part of that bet on the money line, because there's a lot of variance in a game like that. Louisiana, a very veteran team, as Brian pointed out. I think some of these teams that have a lot of guys back versus a team that have a lot of new things going on with Sarkisian as the head coach, less returning players. Early on, I think it's worth taking some of those underdogs on the money line. So I do like that play as well.
Brian, what about Alabama, Miami? You mentioned you liked that one too, that game in Atlanta to start the season.
Well, I mentioned how I'm probably going to like Alabama in the first half, but those numbers aren't out yet. Assuming it's 13 or fewer, I'll probably be on Bama in the first half. I got a little bit of it when it was 17.5. I bought the half point to 17, but that number's gone, and I don't think you'll get a chance again. I'm a little – I don't know if I want to lay 19. I will go to another game where the line is actually getting better, and that is LSU, which I liked at 4.5, and now it's down to 3.5 at UCLA. And this hinges on Max Johnson obviously staying healthy the rest of camp, because Miles Brennan got hurt. And I'm going to not take LSU's win total now because of Brennan's injury, because if Max Johnson gets hurt, they're going to be starting a true freshman in Nussmeier's son, my former Gator OC, who I am not a big fan of. But anyway, Max Johnson played well down the stretch last year. And, LSU was set up to fail last year, not only just the hangover from the title, but, they had all those 14 players drafted. And then they had several huge opt-outs, including first-team All-American Jamar Chase and several defensive guys. So they were totally set up to fail last year, but then got 2 nice wins at the end of the season, played a lot of young guys. They're good at wide receiver. And, UCLA is among tops in the nation in returning production and returning starters, but they're still 10-21 straight up, 14-17 against the spread on Chip Kelly's watch, 13 of those 21 L's by 9 points or more. I think LSU, going out west, if it was in the middle of October in the week-to-week grind, that'd be a little bit of a concern. But for the first game, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And I think LSU wins by double digits. I think it's easy pickings with the LSU Tigers in week 1.
Well, guys, I appreciate your time and your insight here looking ahead to the college football season. We made it to August. We got here. I know NFL preseason's underway, but also college football. That will be starting coming up in about a week and a half or so with week 0 and then with week 1. And then we'll be rocking and rolling with this. Brian Edwards, Kyle Hunter. You could check out their picks at vegasinsider.com. Both guys were tremendous last year in totals. I'm not saying they're not good in sides, but in totals, they were both in the top 3. But check out Brian and Kyle's picks as the season progresses in college football. Guys, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot.
All right, guys, thanks so much. I am Kevin Rogers, and if you missed any of the Daily Insider, you could find it at vegasinsider.com, either on our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider or on our homepage. And once again, I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks so much for watching the Daily Insider right here on vegasinsider.com.